Now. So welcome along, everybody. Nice to have you listening in to Matt and I talking today about mental health first aiders, everything you need to know in your business about why to have mental health first aiders, what they do, and what support's available for them. So hopefully we're going to answer lots of the questions that we keep getting from businesses, from managers, and from mental health first aiders themselves. I thought it was worth bringing all of the answers in together in one place, and hopefully you'll find this conversation useful. So do some quick introductions. I'm Heidi from Reality HR. I'm Head of Learning and Development. So I look after designing and delivering bespoke management and leadership training for businesses all over the UK. But I leave the mental health first aider training to the experts, which is why we've got Matt along with us today. So I'm delighted to introduce Matt, who's going to tell us a bit about his role in the mental health first aid programme. Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Heidi. So my name's Matt Holman, and I am the founder of a company called Simpila Wellbeing, and we deliver a lot of training on mental health first aid, and a whole variety of different training programs to help organisations to sort of embed better communication, better conversations, better support as well. So it's great to be here in a partnership with Reality HR as well. We're really pleased with the relationship that we've had over the last few years. We've trained quite a few people in mental health first aid programs, so it's great. So we just wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about them. I guess that's the key for this, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We've got a lot we want to cover in the next, I don't know, 20 minutes. I was going to say 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Matt and I do go off-piste. We have been known to head off in all sorts of directions. So we're going to try and stick to the session outline, which is here. We're going to talk about what's the role of mental health first aiders and importantly, what isn't their role as well. How do you select and train your mental health first aiders in the first place? What are some of the legal, policy and procedural considerations we need to take into account if you're looking to implement mental health first aiders in an organisation? What do you need to be mindful of? How do you support and utilise your mental health first aiders? I was saying to Matt earlier that I did my mental health first aid training 3 years ago, and hold my hands up and say I haven't thought about it since the training finished. How do you avoid that pitfall if you're going to go to the trouble of training people? How do we keep that alive? How effective is mental health first aid as a programme? Have we got data, and do you track in your organisations a return on investment from the time spent training those mental health first aiders? And hopefully we'll wrap up with a few ideas, practicalities, next steps for you all to take away, whether that's something you want to do as an organisation, or hopefully we're reigniting the mental health first aiders' passion for the role and reminding you all of what you could and should be doing and how you can be delivering value. So that's the programme that we're going to try and talk about for the next few minutes. We'll see how we get on for time, and hopefully we'll try and keep ourselves on track. But I decided that we didn't want to do this as a sort of a traditional PowerPoint, so I'm going to get rid of that. And you're just going to have to listen to Matt and I talking to each other. So we are just going to do this as a bit of a conversation, and hopefully all of you listening back later find it an interesting and useful conversation. So we'll start, Matt, if you don't mind, by me asking you, what is the role of a mental health first aider? Why are we talking about this? What are they for? What do they do?
Wow, that's going to take about 20 minutes for the response to that one, I think. You know what? I think the key to this is reminding us of the importance of first aid at work. So, when we talk about mental health first aid, of course, for years, we've already, we've got embedded physical first aid. We've had that around for many, many years. Mental health first aid obviously touches on a very important topic within the workplace, which touches to mental health. And there is still not a mandatory requirement for companies or organisations to have mental health first aiders, albeit when you look at the breakdown of sort of, accidents at work and injuries at work, and, the challenges when we then start to overlay things like stress and burnout and other conditions, there's a huge, movement or sway towards the mental or psychological support that people might need. So mental health first aid has been around for almost 20 years, actually. It's born out of Australia originally, but came to the UK about 15 years ago. And the idea behind it is really simple concept. It's providing a safe space for people to be able to talk openly about some of the challenges they might be experiencing, and they're able to then find pathways towards support. So the role of the mental health first aider is exactly that we are there to help people when they need somewhere to talk. Maybe it's not their manager, maybe they feel uncomfortable talking to other peers or people in the organization. So as an independent role to the organization, in the sense of you're not aligned just to one area, you are the person that people go to, and have that conversation. We also are really clear on, when we're training mental health first aiders, the importance of approaching conversations. So proactively taking a lead in, I see something that's concerning me. So we teach people about the behaviors, we're looking for changes in behaviors. We talk about all the different aspects and why changes behaviors have taken place, and then help people to just sort of open up a little bit more about what's going on. So we're trying to change the approach, the way that organizations work, to support their teams. And that is ultimately what the mental health first aider is there to do, is to help people before it becomes too challenging, albeit we also help people who might go into what we call crisis, but to try and avert the crisis from becoming too challenging. And it all links together, really. So I think it's a really important role, Heidi. I think that for anybody listening, if you don't have mental health first aiders already, it is a good opportunity to think about, okay, so how could we use mental health first aiders to support our community of our workplace? Yeah.
Now, we would wonder, sometimes think, well, maybe those conversations could be led by line managers. And you mentioned there that this is someone independent who's not a line manager. And I was just going to pick up on that and say that often our line managers haven't had training to do this. Often they're very busy. So actually having that independent person can be a really good supplement. I don't think it detracts and says line managers never have to speak about this, but it's a super alternative, isn't it, for people?
Oh, absolutely. And training, and I've trained thousands of people in mental health first aid. And the interesting conversation that you have with a lot of mental health first aiders is, my manager should be doing this, or all of the companies should do this training. And actually there is an argument there that said every person should do the training, right? Because I genuinely think the skills that you learn, and you mentioned at the beginning in your opening, you trained 3 years ago, you haven't used the model. But I sort of challenge that for anybody who has done the training, to say you are using the models, you are using the skills, but you just don't realize, because you don't frame it in that was a mental health first aid conversation. That was, the fact that you're having small interactions and engagements with people, that's really powerful and really important. We're in a world where there is so much disconnection, isolation, loneliness. Actually, mental health first aiders, for me, everybody is a mental health first aider. And people get scared, I think, and let me just sort of debunk a myth here. People get scared by the name mental health first aider, thinking there's you have to run around with a first aid kit, and you have to administer CPR to people and all this. No, what it's about is, it's a set of skills that enable you, and the lessons you learn through the training actually sit really well for all aspects of life. So it's not just saying, right, I go to work 9 to 5, I'm a mental health first aider, what am I going to do when I go home? I'm not. You use it everywhere. I use it in all settings, with friends, with family, with my team, with all the people that I work with, because the skills are there. Once they're in, you just work on them, you hone them, you support them, you do more with them. I talk about all the topics around mental health, suicide, neurodiversity, menopause, any topic, and I don't feel uncomfortable anymore, because I've normalized them. And that's ultimately what this skill set from mental health first aid enables people to do, is to normalize the hard conversations. So
It's good for
anybody can do
everyone
it.
then. Good for
Yeah,
everyone,
100%.
whether you're
Yeah.
going to be badged as a mental health first aider or not. It's about those communication and empathy and understanding those skills.
100%. And it's that point, we are pre-programmed with lots of judgmental thoughts. We have an opinion, we know what we believe is the truth, we recognize what we understand from the things that we consume. And it's scary, isn't it? Because one of the biggest challenges we have is, there's a misunderstanding that's taken place, which means there's a lot of stigma. So we stigmatize people because we don't understand it. Communication channels and social media and everywhere else. And sorry to go off on a bit of a tangent with this, we did say we would, but when you look at the reality of what people consume in terms of information, a lot of it is factually not 100% correct. So what we're trying to create is a community that says, these are the facts, these are the sources of those facts. So things like, if somebody's struggling with an eating disorder, BEAT is the best organization when it comes to a charity to support people. Mind is the biggest mental health charity, Samaritans is a great. So but making sure that people know the true place to get their help and support, and that's often a struggle for people. So again, it comes back to that point of, well, that's beneficial for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah.
So a manager, an employee, a leader, whoever it is in the system, everybody could have, a good investment in those skills. And the best organizations out there, in all honesty, Heidi, are the ones where the leaders have taken the course as well, because they have then that wonderful appreciation of, okay, so we're all in it together.
And I think that's a really laudable aim. I think it's a really nice thought that the more people we can train, the better, because it helps develop these skills for difficult conversations and normalizing difficult conversations. But realistically, most of the organizations, certainly we work with, are not going to train more than 2 or 3 people. Is there a sort of recommendation, Matt? And I've put you on the spot here for, should you have like one mental health first aider per 50 employees, or is there any sort of recommendation, or is it really up to every company to work that out for themselves?
You know what? I think it comes down to a couple of key points. The first one is, the recommendation is 1 in 20, right? So one
Okay.
in 20, so one mental health first aider for every 20 personnel in the organization. However, you can change those numbers slightly because of the number of mental health first aiders that you would have. So if you're a company of 200 and you have 10, that might be too many. So you might say, well, I have 6 or 8. It really
Mm.
comes down to the infrastructure that you implement with it. But so if you've got one, and I do a lot of trainings where one person comes along, and I've had examples where quite extreme where somebody says, well, I'm coming along to become the mental health first aider. And you ask them how many people are in the organization. They'll say, well, there's 200. You say, how many mental health first aiders do you have? And they say, no, 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 I'm going to be the mental health first aider. So already, I'm sure everybody can understand, and listening to, what I'm trying to share, there's a big risk. Because what happens if 10, 20, 30 people in the company, statistically 1 in 4 people are going to experience some challenges. So what if 50 people comes to that one mental health first aider? They've got their day job still as well, because it's not an assigned full-time job. What happens to them? How do they cope with that? So
Mm.
it really comes down to the recognizing the size of the organization, and that's what I love to do, and I know you do as well, Heidi, is work with organizations to say, okay, look, let's not try and overkill with the number of people. We're not going to try and overload it, but let's make it realistic. If you
Yeah.
want a system that's going to work, if you want support in place that's going to help, be realistic. Don't be unrealistic in expectations. Don't set a 1 per 200 people expectation, because there's a
Yeah.
big risk, and you're risking
Mm.
that one person. What happens when they go on holiday? What happens when they're not there anymore? Who picks up? So
And what happens when
take
they're
account of,
overwhelmed and they're personally
yeah,
struggling with all the
yeah,
stories they're hearing and
yeah.
all the support they're giving? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you've got 50 people who are struggling, I worry about the 150 who aren't yet, because it's the yet, isn't it? So we've
Mm.
got some fundamental challenges that we have to recognize before we implement. But yeah, I think it's a conversation, and it
Yeah.
would never be you need 1 per 1. It would always be, just be mindful of support. How do you help the
Yeah.
person? How do you help the community? And offloading as a mental health first aider is a really important part as well when we talk about boundaries. And you can't just go home and leave your phone on all night hoping that nobody needs you at night. You need to set some boundaries.
And how do we select those? Once we've worked out as an organisation how many feels an appropriate number, how do we attract them or select them? What's the most common approach in that, Matt, to get people to volunteer?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a couple of things that you can look at. You can have your natural ones, so there will always be natural people who people will go to. I see that a lot in training, where somebody comes along to the training because they're the person that everybody always goes and talks to anyway. So
Yeah.
so naturally they it makes sense, right? Of course, depending on their position and where they are and what they do, that's going to be a bit of an influencer. But if you've got a team of people, and there's a number of people that want to volunteer for that role, I'm always keen to sort of understand a bit of motivation. So rather than just going around the room and saying, right, we need 2 over there and 1 over there and 2 over there, which we probably will anyway, really encourage people to volunteer it. Who would like to become the mental health first aider? Who would be interested? And what we've done with previous clients as well is we've given them sort of very simple questions to ask. So firstly is, who would like to do it? Secondly is, why would you like to do it? And thirdly would be, is there anything you can share that might, show that you're really invested in this? Because it's all very
Yeah.
nice having a certificate, not using it, and a badge and everything else, but we want people to use it. We want people to engage with it. We want people who genuinely say, you know what, I really want to start this journey and become the mental health aider. So, and it's really amazing when you see feedback people give. And oftentimes when people see that feedback for the first time, and we've been involved with clients where we've helped with the selection, but when you read people's reasons for wanting to do it, it's really powerful, because you suddenly, or you then grow, and I won't say suddenly, but you then grow an awareness of what you didn't know before, which was, actually this person has had an experience, which means they have empathy already, and they have an understanding or an awareness to some of the
Yeah.
challenges. It's amazing, honestly. I find it fascinating, and I feel, privileged to read it because I see what people actually are saying, which they may never have said to other people. So it's amazing.
And again, that helps normalize, doesn't it? If people can share those
Absolutely.
experiences and stories,
Yeah,
that helps normalize all of these things, which is really what we're trying to do with all of this, is to take away the stigma, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, definitely. It's the only way to do it.
So once we've got our mental health first aiders volunteered, selected, we know who's going to come along. Just give us a
Yeah.
very brief outline of what the training entails, Matt. What does the training look like to become a mental health first aider?
Okay, so just to simplify the structure, so it's 2 full days. We deliver them either back to back as days. It mostly is delivered virtually. We can deliver it in person as well for, if there's a certain number of people that clients want. So we'd always engage and talk to clients. One of the benefits of the virtual world is, of course, people can join from anywhere. So you don't have to all be in one central location. So what we found was, economically for a lot of clients, they didn't have to travel, they didn't have to come in. So it's online. Okay, that's a little bit more challenging, sitting in front of a screen for 7 or 8 hours a day, because they are full days. It's structured as sort of 4 modules throughout throughout the 2 days. All materials are sent to the delegates in advance. Everything is through a virtual platform. I love sort of delivering it and managing it. We talk about all the topics. We talk about all of the challenging topics around mental health. We build a sort of a platform which enables that sort of growth for the individual. Now, some people, who come, we have a full range of delegates. So some people come to it with great high levels of experience. And one of the questions I ask very much at the beginning for all delegates is, what do you know about mental health? And some people say, I know a lot because of personal experience. Some people will say, I know a little because I've supported somebody. And some people will also say, I know nothing about this. And actually, it's great to know, because it helps everybody in that world or in that space to recognize that we're all in different places on our learning experience. And clearly, at the end of that training, I make a very positive point to say, firstly, congratulations, you've done the training, which is always lovely when everybody sort of sits there and you can see that there is no exam at the end of it. So we're always, I may play around with that sometimes and threaten it if people are not behaving too well in the training. But that's a facilitator's right. So
Yeah,
so just to filter it out. And then at the end, I just make it really clear this is the start of the journey, because now you need to use the skills. Now you need to practice. Now you need to continue to learn and take that forward. And lots of people that have attended the program, just sort of expand it beyond the training, have then gone on to maybe become Samaritans or gone on to organizations where they're volunteering to help support mental health. And I just love that, because it's that, how do you continue that journey? And lots of people come to me independently and ask, what can I do next? Or what can I learn next? And it's great. So good.
what can companies do then to keep that alive? What should be the next steps after we've got our mental health first aiders trained? We're ready to go. How do we launch that? How do we go out to the company and the rest of the rest of the staff, the rest of the employees, the rest of the community, and say, you've got these guys now available? How do we do that?
I think there's again, a couple of easy steps, really. Easy embedding steps. Firstly is have awareness before you do the training, right? So I'm always very clear, just putting a one mental health first aider in and making an announcement on an email isn't going to cut it, really, because you know what, people are busy and we all get lots of emails, and that email gets lost in translation because they don't realize what it is. So here's a thought. So as an organization, as a business, the first thing you should do before launching mental health first aid, so taking it one step back before, is to do some form of awareness raising for everybody. So talk to everybody about personal investment in themselves, understanding mental health from their perspective. So a little bit of the stuff that we would take from mental health, and we're talking about a 30 to 45-minute session. That's all it is. But the idea is, what you're doing is preparing the ground for the arrival of the mental health first aiders. If we do it the other way around, because I've seen that over many years. I've been training mental health first aid since 2017, 18 now, so 7 years. What we saw at the beginning was there was a big surge on getting mental health first aiders, but there wasn't a very strong focus on how to use them, how to pull them. So now, awareness first, 30 to 45 minutes, do a session with the whole company just to say, this is mental health, this is the importance of looking after yourself, this is a thing called the stress container, which is important for you individually to manage. And then if you are struggling, or at any point you do feel like there is something you need to talk to somebody about, here are your options. So you might have Samaritans, you might have the Hub of Hope, and you might have mental health first aiders or an employee assistance program or whatever it is. And then we sort of generate some energy around the mental health first aiders. And then the mental health first aiders are trained. They're then brought in to the organisation through an announcement. So just to let everybody know, following on from the awareness session, we've now got these mental health first aiders, and these are your mental health first aiders, Matt and Heidi, and so on. So, and it just works really well because people are already then aware of why the mental health first aiders are coming or what that means. Does that sort of make sense? Is that sort of fair? And because that to me is the way it works really well.
Yeah, I love that thought. I'm not sure that we always get quite that level of proactivity.
Yeah,
Sometimes we send our mental health first aiders off on their training and we've missed that step. But I think that awareness piece, as you say, is a really useful tool. The other thing
yeah.
that occurs to me is the wellness action plans that
Mm.
we talk about these a lot. We got a template on our website. You can download a wellness or a wellbeing action plan. And that's a tool really that managers can use in one-to-ones to have conversation with individuals, with every person in the company to say, what keeps you well?
Yeah,
What impacts your mental health? What do you need from me? How will I know if you're struggling? How do you want me to act in that scenario if I notice XYZ? What should I do? Who should I call? So that's another preemptive thing that can come before we announce our mental health first aiders, because again, it just gets that awareness out there that we want to help as a company. We want to have these conversations, and there isn't stigma anymore on them. We
yeah,
are here to help, and we're here to have open, honest conversations. So brilliant.
yeah.
That's super, really helpful. Thank you, Matt. I'm going to make sure that next time anyone says to me about mental health first aiders, we look at that awareness piece first before we
Yeah.
start the training. I think that's a really good shout.
I think if you've got the chance to do it, and
Yeah,
that's what I would always say to clients, if I have a new client come on board, my first thing isn't to go, right, you need 5 of these or 10 of these. My first thing is to sit down and say, okay, so what do you do already? Do that sort of audit of, and a lot of people struggle with that because what we tend to do, and this is something I've seen over a number of years and just sort of insights for anybody listening is, we became very good at putting support in place, being an employee assistance program or a platform that people can access if they need help. The thing that we weren't very good at was connecting the people to the programs. And I saw that a lot and that comes down to that point of ground, foundational awareness. We didn't tell people what it was for. We just gave them a solution. And I think that's really important. So when I sit with people, I sort of draw 3 boxes on a piece of paper, and one says awareness, one says education, and one says support. And all I ask them to do is complete that. So tell me, what do you do in awareness? What are you doing? So we've got mental health awareness days, we've got World Suicide Prevention Day, we've got a whole host of days and events and activities that take place. What do you do on those events? Do you do anything? Some people do things, some people don't do anything, but it doesn't necessarily connect to it. And then in education, what do you do with education? How are you supporting managers to grow in their roles? How are you helping them to learn this wonderful thing about emotional intelligence, not just about the functional role that they have as a manager? And thirdly, what do you do in support? So you might have an employee assistance program, some sort of insurances or some other platforms. So if they're not connecting together in a
yeah,
nice lined up approach, you're missing something. So there's a reason why your teams aren't using the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, and I can tell you why that is. It's because most people don't understand what it's for. Most people don't know when they need it. Most people don't trust that the program's confidential. So we haven't even addressed those basic needs of the individual because we've given a solution that we believe is right for the company. So that's the thing that we need to do, is determine sort of where on the program people sit today. And some people have done some really great things, by the way. That's not, I would never go in there and say you haven't done anything. It's horrendous. I'll go in there and go, you haven't done anything. So that means there's an opportunity. And if you have done things, let's capture what they are and work out how that's connected to the people. So yeah, there's ways and means to do it. But I think the best organizations that I've seen are where we've gone in, blank sheet of paper, design something with that awareness piece that comes at the beginning, and then work through the program towards, there's support, there is support out there, there is always support, but people don't realize when, how, and where that is and how they can access it.
and that's really interesting, Matt. That's making sure that all of our initiatives are kind of joined up, so they fall into
Yeah,
those buckets. So we're doing awareness, we're doing education, but are we linking them together? I
yeah,
think that we often find that companies come to us and say, oh, we need to do something around well-being, but we don't know where to start because it's too big and it sounds a bit scary and we don't really know what to do first. We ask that same question: what are you already doing? Oh, well, we don't do much, we've just got an EAP, or we've just got this, or we just do that. And I think actually all those little parts are really, really important.
yeah,
And I think that most companies will we don't celebrate enough what we're already doing, because it actually feels like we've got so much more to do. And I think that that's a really, really important point to recognise, that there will be things, even in your sort of existing employee handbook, there'll be things in there that say, you know, about support, about well-being,
Yeah.
even if it's not titled well-being policy for our company. We're all doing bits and bobs. We've got, you know, but it's about joining it up. I think exactly as you say there, it's about making sure that we've got that linkage across all the things we're doing, link in, and we're giving the right solutions or the right options for the people in our organisation.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even when we talk about topics like well-being, you know, we can easily sort of take notice of, you know, small things that the company do. Maybe you encourage people to take half an hour break away from your desk at lunchtime, you know, and if you are doing that, that's really powerful, because in terms of your role in well-being, it's about, as a company, you know, I'm always very clear that I can't, as a company owner, make people do things, you know, so I can't say to people, go for a walk. You know, I can't say you need to go for a run because it will help clear your head. But what I can do is encourage people. And so, and if I'm encouraging and if I'm in that role, then actually I'm helping them with their mental health and things like that, you know. So we talk about sort of the cost of investment. I know that's part of this conversation we wanted to have as well. It's, you know, so actually there's a lot of things you can do with no cost at all. But sometimes we don't take time to think about the things we can do which don't impact on the, you know, the money side of things. You know, mental health first aid training does cost money, you know, so there is a budget requirement for it. However, I don't think we look at it in the right budget. I think we look at it in the wrong budget, because it's not a training budget, it's a retention budget that it should be looking at, you know, because ultimately a mental health first aider has the capacity to help people before they become too unwell and then go off sick, and then maybe leave because the company just isn't there to support. So, you know, I don't know what you feel about that, Heidi, but from my perspective, you know, when somebody says we're cutting training, this isn't training. Trainings is a skill-based thing of, you know, to be able to do your job. That's what I feel. You know, this is about retention. This is about growing. This is about helping support your company. You know, don't know. What do you think about that one?
No, I really like that. I think you're absolutely right. And I would also say on this point that actually mental health first aid training is very, very reasonably priced. It is
Oh,
not an
yeah.
expensive training solution by
No.
any means. So we wouldn't want to put anyone off, you know, or anyone to feel that, oh, I don't have any budget. Actually, this is a really, really
Yeah.
good value for money option. And as you said there, if we use our mental health first aid as well, if we implement them well, we've done the awareness piece, we've got the right mental health first aiders who are enthused and supported, actually there can be some really powerful impacts from their role. I think it's probably fairly common that people are in the same boat as I am, that I don't, you know, we haven't had the value out of my training personally, but that's one of the reasons we wanted this conversation, is to come back to you all as mental health first aiders and say, when you did your training, you were enthused when you left. How can we help you to be re-enthused?
Yeah.
And as an organisation, how can we make sure you get a good return on your investment? Because it's 2 days of, you know, people being out of work. It's not an expensive 2 days, but it's 2 days away from their day job.
Yeah.
So it's the time as much as the money. How do we make sure we keep that alive? And I think, in my experience, that's where it often falls down, that we tick that box that we've sent people on mental health first aid training and we think we've done it.
Yeah.
And actually that's where there's a bit of a disconnect then about keeping that alive. And that, I think, is something that, you know, we certainly get asked. And whenever I talk to sort of business owners about, oh, do you have mental health first aiders? Have you thought about it? And they say, oh, no, because no one ever goes to them. Okay, well, you know, they do in some organisations, and let's look at those practices. So what would you say, Matt, is the most important things there for us to be doing once we've got our mental health first aiders trained? We turn back up, we're really enthused, we're going to be brilliant, and we're going to support the community and our colleagues. How do we keep that energy and commitment alive? What can we do as individuals and as the company as a whole?
Well, you know, I think firstly, individuals, you know, when we train mental health first aiders, the one thing that I'm always encouraged about, whether it's, you know, true or whether they're just saying it for lips, is the fact that they've had an incredible experience doing the training.
Yeah.
You know, so from that point, you have to remain, or, you know, maintain that motivation. You can't come into my classroom every day to ask me to re-motivate and re-energize. You know, I always sort of say to people, you know, I'm sat on your shoulder just telling you, you know, make sure you're using this, do this. People use the skills, you know, because you will embed them naturally. They will become ingrained. You know, it's like anything, isn't it? It's like the first time the phone rings, it's hard because you don't know what to say, but the second time you already have answered it once, so you've got a little bit of history, and by the time you've answered it 10 times, you know sort of a natural flow of what to do with the conversations. Yeah, and I always try and make a very clear point that no conversation is a bad conversation, because if you think about the alternative, it's no conversation. So people aren't talking, people aren't having those open discussions. But in terms of sort of what do you do to keep motivated, well, you sort of, as a mental health first aider, need to continue to be passionate about the topic. You need to keep your finger on that pulse a little bit. And I say that because we actually communicate with all the mental health first aiders that we train with, a regular fortnightly communication, very simple couple of paragraphs just to say your role as a mental health first aider is really important. Don't forget, you're doing a great job, and you're helping people. And even if you only help one person in 3 years, do you know what? That's one person more than nobody. So, these are all really important things. But even again, going back to the point that you trained 3 or 4 years ago, the refresher training is really important, because you don't have to wait 3 years to do a refresher, right? We say within mental health first aid that maximum is 3 years from the point of the original training. And what I would suggest is, if people have done it more than 3 years ago and they haven't done a refresher, is resit the training, because the new training is much more aligned to having conversations. There was a change and a transition. I think when we went through the COVID years and we went virtual with training, there was a big overhaul of the training modules, so that it became much more about the listening skills and the conversations, which is great, which a lot of people potentially would have missed in the original training. It was much more focused on other sort of activity. But so re-engage, reinvest, albeit it's another investment. It's a really valuable investment, because for any of us looking at statistics out there in the big wide world, things are getting harder. There are some real challenges that are out there, and we see that in the business world and in our own personal experiences. So keep engaged, re-engage, do the refresher training. I love training people in refresher, because it shows me sort of there's still a commitment, and people genuinely do want to keep committed to it, albeit they might struggle with, you've got a day job at the end of the day. Everybody's got a day job. Mental health first aiders isn't a full-time occupation, and it should never be a full-time occupation. You just wouldn't be able to manage it at the capacity. So those are the things that I think everybody should try to recognize. And what I really, really want to emphasize about mental health first aiders is you are the voice of mental health for your organization. You're not just the ears of the organization, you're also the mouth, because you can communicate to the teams within the organization what's going on in mental health. So you should be a community within the organization. If there's 2 or 3 of you, you're a group, you should be the ones driving some of those initiatives. So when we talk about things like World Suicide Prevention Day on the 10th of September every year, and World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October, and Mental Health Awareness Week in May, do something with that. Help communicate that to others. And the theme for suicide prevention is about normalizing conversations of suicide. So how many people are going to walk into the office on that day and start talking about suicide? Well, probably none. So as a mental health first aider, it could be your role just to ask questions, not to go up to people directly and ask them, have you ever thought, but to actually ask questions about, what do you think about suicide? What do you know about suicide? Would you share a story about it? So those are the things I think we can do. And it's just about motivation and making those different, because everything we do positively will change things.
So I pick up there, you said if there's a few of you, create a community and sort of re-enthuse each other. And if there are only 1 or 2 of you, then you might find other people in the organisation that can be part of that community. So your HR team, or a manager who's got a passion for this, or one of the leaders who wants to be the champion for this kind of program. So you can find the people around you, find other people, even if they haven't done the training, maybe encourage them to do the training. But actually it's going to be easier, I think, to keep motivated and engaged, isn't it, if you've got people to bounce ideas off with. So if you are the sole mental health first aider, I mean, goodness, in that person who's that 1 in 200, that's a bit challenging. But if you are the only one, actually find other people that have got an interest or care about the topic, and get them to come on board with you and champion with you. It doesn't have to be just mental health first aiders.
No, absolutely.
So brilliant. Okay, so we've talked about the training, 2 days initially, a refresher training after 3 years. That's just a half day, I think, Matt, is that right?
That's right, yeah. 4 hours.
A half day.
Yep.
4 hours. Wonderful. I guess I started to say there, one of the challenges we sometimes get from business owners is, well, is this a good spend? How do we know that we're actually making an impact? Why would we send people on this? What if no one ever talks to our mental health first aiders? What sorts of things do you think we can be looking at to show a return on investment? Are there particular, you mentioned retention. Do we think that we could look at that? Could we track that? Do companies do that?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I think obviously it depends on the size of the organization. We're always mindful that, big organizations, there's a lot more statistics, a lot more data, there's a lot more manager points, there's a lot more, construction of the operations and the organization and stuff. So we're always very mindful to that, but I think what we're trying to do is we are trying to reduce the risk, right? So Deloitte sort of put out a statistic that says for every £1 invested, you're going to return £5 on your investment, right? So that's the one that's out there about mental health, investing in mental health, and if you're investing £1,000 and you're making £5,000 on the other side, actually that comes from the reduction in sick days, the reduction,
Yeah.
the engagement increases when people feel more support. We didn't even talk to sort of psychological safety, but when people feel psychologically safe in their role, they're more inclined to do a better job. They're more inclined to be more productive. They're more inclined to, feel that the company cares, and there is a big part of that within this. So the investment. So there's a number of different things there which can help people to justify. Okay, so let's be honest and transparent. For 3 mental health first aiders for an organisation, it's going to cost you, £1,000. So that £1,000 investment is what's the value in comparison to somebody being off sick for 6 months? What's the comparison to somebody not coming back after sickness because they're just too unwell to come back? So if we're investing early, and I'm not saying that expedites service and support, but what it does do is it engages conversations much sooner. We can prevent illnesses from becoming serious by being preventative, proactive.
Yeah.
So the idea is, if we've got that small, group, community, people, whatever we want to call it, working proactively, which ultimately is what we want to try to get to, we minimize the risk of needing extra support and help, which is really difficult to access at the moment, as we know.
Yeah.
So I think all the justifications are there. I think
Yeah.
there's a nervousness to it, going, yeah, but it's cash and it's money and it's things. We need to have that conversation. you know
Yeah.
I think if people are shutting it down because they feel that the budget's going to be too much, then we're not focusing in the right way. One of the things, I did something really interesting with a client where, albeit it was a bigger client, we worked out that the whole global support program for mental health, whether it's mental health first aiders, managers, and so on, was less than a cup of coffee per person per year. So if it's that expensive, or you think it's that expensive or more expensive, break it down into something that people understand. You know, I would happily have one less coffee a year if I knew that that money was being spent on something that's supporting my colleagues. I would sacrifice my coffee. Yeah, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying it
Yeah.
works in the maths for every company, but what I'm saying is break it down into something that you've got a Christmas party, you've got a meal, you've got this, entertaining budget, you've got something going on, which actually, if you added all those bits together, you would have more than a budget for doing everything you need. So,
Well, I mean, if you think about a person leaving and then the cost of replacing them,
well,
do you want to spend the training of just spend the money now on proactive support, or do you want to spend it on a recruitment agency 6 months down the line once someone's been off sick? It's a really interesting conversation, isn't it?
it is,
About
yeah.
how well
Turnover's
we
really
can
important.
prevent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so turnover becomes quite a big KPI in all of that. So
Mm.
in terms of, I mean, staff turnover, not the big number, but but staff turnover and engagement. How many people are running sort of pulse surveys to see how engaged people are? How often do we take notice of how many people are going off sick and when they're going off
Mm.
sick and for how long? And really, once we wrap our arms around all of that, I've always made a comment with HR teams where I've said, when we look at things like absenteeism, of course, we all know that there's also this thing called presenteeism, which is sick people at work, who, and then you look at the reasons why, because statutory sick pay and things like that, and number of days and stuff. But what we've got to recognise is when we talk about mental health. Now, this is a warning. It comes with a hazard warning. The more we talk about mental health, the more people will have problems. That's what we hear constantly. So if we say this is what depression is and this is how it works, one of the things that most companies are scared of is if we tell everybody what it is and what it looks like, there's going to be a lot of people who go, oh my gosh, I've got depression. Right? Now, I also then say, please don't be scared by that, because what you're actually doing is you're helping people to connect to the truth of what's really happening for them. Yeah. So as much as people will come and say, I've got it, the biggest question, and this is where mental health first aid becomes really powerful for organizations, is to say, look, well, thank you for sharing that. And what are you going to do about it? What are we going to do? What can we help you with? And what are you going to do? So what's your role? What's my role? Because now people are actually taking action rather than just sitting there and going, I don't know what's going on. I just can't engage. I'm disengaging from the workplace. My manager's not helping me. I'm going to leave. So again, it's another. I've got 1,000 justifications for why this training is really helpful. I hope you hear it. I hope people are hearing it. But it's just so important because we need to engage in better conversations. We need to help people sooner. We need to be preventative versus reactive. And we're a country that are quite good at crisis management. Well, I'm not sure about that, but we react to a crisis a lot.
Yeah, and this is about preventing. This is about getting in much earlier, isn't it? It's about creating those safe spaces, open spaces to prevent it escalating. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful.
There we go.
Excellent. Right. Well, I think
our 20 minutes has been very long.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've covered pretty much everything we wanted to on the sort of session outline. I'm just going to pop that back up on the screen, make sure we have looked at everything we said we were going to do. So we've really talked quite a lot about the role of mental health first aiders, how we select and train them. Yeah. We've said there's no legal requirement to have them, but we've got loads of best practice justifications, loads of explanation and real live examples of how mental health first aiders really can help your metrics. We've talked about how to really utilise your mental health first aiders, get them enthused, keep them creating that community so they can keep talking. And so I guess next steps then, if you're here listening today wondering, should we have mental health first aiders? Hopefully we've convinced you that there might be some benefit. You can get in touch with either Matt or myself to talk about how many you might want, who that might be, how you're going to pre-position the awareness before you send them on the training, as Matt's really helpfully explained to us. Our contact details are on the screen there. Hopefully get in touch with either of us. We'll be able to talk you through what that might look like. And if you are a mental health first aider that thinks, oh God, I wish I'd done more with it, go on the refresher training or redo the 2 days. Yeah. Again, get in touch with either Matt or myself and we'll be able to sort you out with dates. I know, Matt, you've got dates coming up in October, November, running every month. You've got training and refresher training running every month that people can join on to. And if you're a slightly larger organisation and you've got 8, 9, 10 people that want to do this themselves, Matt can come in and do that just for your organisation. So please get in touch if you've got any questions at all, anything we haven't answered. But hopefully I've gathered all the questions we've been asked over the last 6 months and we've answered them all. Fingers crossed it's been helpful and you've all enjoyed listening to me and Matt waffle on. We stuck fairly well to our agenda, I think, Matt. So yeah. Any last words when we wrap up?
I think, my last thoughts are always, anybody that volunteers to be a mental health first aider, it is a volunteering role, and you volunteer with that thought of I want to help, and I always believe that. I love working with as many people as possible. I set my life goal and ambition now is just to help as many people as I can, and by training people in mental health first aid, I feel that fulfills part of that, because you then go forward and you help other people. So we're all going through experiences, and I think that's sort of half the challenge, isn't it? And it's recognizing that the experiences for many around us are challenging, and we go through our own as well, and I just want everybody to feel that there is a safe space to be able to do this, and that's why I create. And so I would love to see more and more people training in these modes, whether it's with me, whether it's with other providers. I don't see this as a competitive space, because actually what we're doing is we're helping. So please, feel free, get in touch, as Heidi says, and we'd love to hear from a few people, get a few more people on the trainings as well, which would be grand. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Matt. It's been really great to talk to you. We will hopefully be talking again soon and booking people on all the courses. Super.
So fingers crossed. Thank you. Take care.
Excellent. Everyone. Thank you.